The velvet rope felt like a border wall. Imani Whitfield stood on the wet sidewalk outside Cheongdam Noir, the most exclusive private club in Seoul's Gangnam district, and watched her own reflection warp in the puddles at her feet. 32 years old, 6 years of Korean language study, a master's degree in international finance from Wharton, a silk midnight blue toteme dress that had cost her 3 weeks of savings. And still, the doorman, a young man with a jaw sharp enough to slice paper, had just looked through her like she was made of nothing. "Guest list only," he said again, in English this time, slower, as if she hadn't understood him the first 2 times in Korean. Behind her, the small crowd that had gathered under black umbrellas began to snicker, cameras lifted. Someone, a woman in a cropped Miu Miu jacket, laughed into her friend's shoulder and said, in Korean she thought Imani couldn't parse, "She really thought she could walk in here. Look at her." Imani understood every word. The rain intensified, plastering a curl to her forehead. She had been invited. She had the QR code on her phone, the signed physical invitation folded in her clutch, an entire email chain with the club's concierge confirming her reservation for the private tasting hosted by Beck Holdings. She was the North American acquisitions lead for Vantage Capital. She was supposed to be inside at table 7, closing the deal that would either make her career or bury it. But the doorman scanned her code, frowned, scanned it again, and shook his head. System error. "Try again next week." He was lying. She knew he was lying, and he knew she knew. 2 white men in charcoal suits stepped past her without breaking stride, scanned, green light, bowed through. The door swung shut behind them with a hush of climate-controlled air that smelled like cedar and old money. Her throat tightened, not from tears. She was past tears. From the specific quiet fury of a woman who had spent her whole life being told not yet, not you, not here, and had spent her whole life smiling and trying harder anyway. She was about to turn around. She was about to walk back to the taxi rank in the rain, call her boss, absorb the humiliation into her body like she had absorbed 1,000 others, and pretend at Monday's meeting that the deal had simply fallen through. Then the street went quiet, not metaphorically, literally. The snickers cut off, the cameras lowered. Even the rain seemed to hush against the awnings as a matte black Maybach rolled to a stop directly in front of the entrance, and the passenger door, the one closest to Imani, opened from the inside. A man stepped out. Tall, charcoal overcoat, silver watch catching the streetlight. His face was one of those faces you don't forget. A narrow scar running from his left temple down to his jaw, cheekbones like architecture, eyes so still they made the world around them feel loud. The doorman went pale, bowed so deeply his forehead almost touched his knees. The man in the coat didn't look at him. He looked at Imani. He crossed the sidewalk in 4 unhurried steps, stopped in front of her, and did something no one on that street had ever seen anyone do at Cheongdam Noir. He extended his arm. "Ms. Whitfield," he said in English so clean it startled her. "I apologize for the wait. Please, walk in with me." The crowd made a sound that wasn't quite a gasp. The doorman's forehead was still pressed toward the concrete. Imani looked at the arm, at the scar, at the eyes that were, impossibly, waiting for her answer. She took it. But to understand how Imani Whitfield ended up on a Seoul sidewalk, taking the arm of a man half the country whispered about, and the other half pretended not to know, we need to go back. If you've ever walked into a room and felt yourself get smaller before you even sat down, this story is for you. If you've ever been the most qualified person in the meeting and still had to prove you belonged, this story is for you. If you've ever loved people who only loved the version of you that made their lives easier, sister, keep watching. Because what happened to Imani Whitfield over the next 93 days is going to feel less like fiction and more like a mirror. I need you to ask yourself a question before we go any further. Not out loud, just in the quiet part of your chest where you keep the things you don't say. The question is this: when was the last time someone showed up for you the way you have always shown up for everyone else? Sit with that. Then drop a single word in the comments, just one, that describes how that question made you feel. I read every comment on this channel, and I'm going to be watching this one closely. If this is your first time here, welcome. This channel is where grown women come to remember who they are. Hit that subscribe button and turn the notification bell on, because part 2 of the story you're about to hear does not go where you think it goes. And the ending, the real ending, the one that has nothing to do with a man, is the reason I wrote this in the first place. Now, let me tell you about the woman before the sidewalk. Because before Imani was standing in the rain in Seoul, she was standing in a kitchen in Baltimore, holding a phone against her ear, and giving away the last piece of herself she had left. 2 years earlier, Imani Whitfield lived in a one-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor of a walk-up in the Mount Vernon neighborhood of Baltimore, in a building where the radiator clanked so loudly at night, she'd learned to sleep through it the way sailors learn to sleep through storms. She was the oldest of 4. In the Whitfield family, oldest was not a birth order. It was a job description. Her mother, Dolores, had raised the 4 of them on the salary of a hospital cafeteria manager. After their father walked out the summer Imani turned 11. Dolores was proud in the way women of her generation were proud, with her back straight and her mouth closed about the things that hurt. She had told Imani the night after the divorce papers arrived, "Baby, you the strong one. I'm gonna need you." Imani had nodded. She had been 11. She had understood it as love. She would spend the next 21 years understanding it as a contract. By 30, she had put her youngest brother Terrence through community college. She had co-signed on her sister Kenya's first apartment. She had paid off the second mortgage her mother had taken out, the one Dolores had never mentioned until the letters from the bank started arriving in red envelopes. She had bought her middle brother, Malik, a used Honda Civic when his got repossessed, and she had never once, not once, asked for the money back. The Whitfields had a running joke at family cookouts. "Call Imani. She got it." It always got a laugh. Imani laughed too. She had trained her face to laugh at things that quietly gutted her. At Vantage Capital, where she worked as an associate on the emerging markets desk, she was the first black woman ever hired into her division. Her boss, a man named Gregory Halpern with the kind of teeth that looked purchased, liked to introduce her at dinners as our secret weapon. He said it warmly. He said it in front of clients. He also, 3 separate times, forgot to invite her to the meetings where her own analyses were presented. She had learned to smile and say, "No worries, I'll catch the next one." She was up for senior associate in 18 months. Everyone told her she was a lock. Everyone had told her she was a lock at the last promotion cycle, too, when a man named Blake, 3 years her junior, whose Excel models she had personally corrected, had gotten the title instead. Gregory had taken her out for a consolation drink at a bar in the Inner Harbor and said, "Next time, Imani, I promise, just keep your head down." Her head had been down for a decade. She was starting to forget what the ceiling looked like. She dated when she had time, which was rarely. There had been a man named Andre for 3 years, a corporate lawyer with a good laugh and a bad habit of comparing her to his ex whenever they argued. There had been a man named Jerome for 8 months, a doctor who had called her ambition cute, until it started intimidating him, at which point it had become a lot. She had ended both relationships herself, both times over a plate of pasta she didn't finish, both times feeling less like a heartbroken woman and more like a landlord finally evicting a tenant who had never paid rent. Her best friend, Nadia Osei, a Ghanaian-American professor at Johns Hopkins who spoke 5 languages and had opinions about all of them, was the only person in Imani's life who ever asked her, unprompted, "But how are you doing?" Nadia had once, over margaritas, looked at her across a table and said, "Imani, I love you, and you are drowning in slow motion, and you're the only one who can't see it." Imani had laughed. She had said, "I'm fine. I just need to hit senior associate. Then I can breathe." She had been saying she just needed to hit the next thing since she was 17. The night that broke her, although she wouldn't recognize it as the night that broke her for another 3 weeks, was a Tuesday in October. She had just gotten home from a 14-hour day. She had eaten a granola bar for lunch and forgotten to eat dinner. She had put her keys down, kicked off the black flats that had given her a blister, and sat on the edge of her bed to call her mother back for the 4th time that day. Dolores had picked up on the second ring. "Baby, good. I need you to Zelle me 1,800 by Friday. The furnace went, and Kenya's daycare called about Amir's tuition. That's another $650. And your Uncle Ray, God bless him, he in the hospital again. So—" Imani had opened her banking app while her mother talked. She had $2,041 in checking. Rent was due in 9 days. Rent was $1,900. "Mama," she had said gently, testing something. "Yeah, baby?" Can Kenya maybe pay Amir's tuition this month? She got that raise in the spring, right? I'm just a little—" There had been a silence on the other end of the line. Then Dolores had laughed, warm and unbothered, and said, "Girl, you know your sister ain't got it like you got it. Don't start being funny now. Don't start being funny. Meaning, don't start being difficult. Meaning, don't start being anyone other than the girl I told you to be when you were 11. Imani had said, "You right. I'll send it Friday." She had hung up. She had sat on the edge of her bed for a long time. She had not cried. She had, instead, done the math in her head. The math of how many years she had left of this. The math of what her life would look like when she was 50 and still the strong one. And she had felt something inside her chest go very, very still. She didn't know it yet, but that stillness was the first thing that would eventually save her life. 3 weeks later, an email arrived from a Seoul-based firm called Beck Holdings requesting a meeting. The email had come through Gregory's assistant, forwarded with 3 exclamation points and the note, "They asked for you specifically. Don't ask me why." Beck Holdings was one of the largest privately held conglomerates in South Korea. Logistics, hospitality, media, and something the analyst reports vaguely called strategic investments. Vantage had been trying to get a meeting with them for 6 years. Every senior partner in the New York office had, at some point, been quietly refused. The word around the firm was that the Bayek family didn't work with Americans. Something about a soured deal in 2011. Nobody talked about the details. And now they had asked, by name, for a 32-year-old associate in Baltimore. Gregory's face, when he called her into his office to discuss the trip, was doing something complicated. "Look, Imani, I don't know what strings you pulled." "I didn't pull any strings, Gregory." Right. Well, whatever. The point is, this is enormous. You go, you take the meeting, you close whatever they're offering, and this could be it for you. Senior associate. Maybe more. He paused. Just remember who your team is. She had heard the warning underneath the sentence. Don't get too big. She had flown into Incheon on a red-eye. She had 11 days in Seoul before the tasting event at Cheongdam Noir, which was, she'd been told, less a meeting and more a vetting. If the Baek family liked her over a 2-hour dinner of aged Hanwoo beef and vintage soju, they would grant her a formal sit-down the following week. If they didn't like her, she would fly home and pretend it never happened. She stayed at a boutique hotel in Bukchon, in a room with a low bed and a view of an old Hanak-tiled roof. She spent the first 3 days walking Seoul in flat shoes and no makeup, listening. She had been to Seoul twice before, on short business trips, but she had never been in it. This time she went to the fish market at Noryangjin at 5 in the morning. She sat in a bunsik shop in Iksan-dong and ate tteokbokki so spicy her ears rang. She walked along the Cheonggyecheon stream at dusk and, for the first time in a decade, thought about nothing. On the 4th night, she went to a small jazz bar in Hongdae called Yongwon-hee. Nadia had told her about it. The owner was a friend of a friend. The bar was in a basement below a bookstore, 12 tables, 1 piano, and a bartender who made an old-fashioned with a cube of ice he chipped by hand. She ordered the old-fashioned. She sat at the far end of the bar. She was reading the menu, in Korean, which she was mildly proud of herself for, when a man's voice on her left said, in careful English, "Excuse me, is anyone sitting there?" She looked up. He was maybe 36, 37, charcoal wool coat, no tie, a dark gray button-down open at the collar. Tall, though he was sitting now, so it was more that he folded tall. Narrow scar down the left side of his face. Old, healed, a thin white line running from his temple almost to his jaw. His eyes were very dark and very still, and they were, right then, doing her the courtesy of not looking her up and down. "No," she said. "It's free." He sat. He ordered a whiskey, Kavalan neat, and thanked the bartender in Korean so casual it made her own Korean sound like a textbook. For a while, neither of them spoke. The pianist was playing Round Midnight, slow, taking his time with the chords. Then the man said, without looking at her, "Your Korean is good." She blinked. "How did you—" "You were mouthing the menu. Your lips moved on the Magyali list. Most tourists point." She laughed, surprised. "That obvious?" "Only if you're paying attention." She turned to look at him properly. He didn't turn to look back. He was watching the pianist's hands. "I'm Imani," she said after a beat. "Junho," he said. Just that. No last name. They talked for 2 hours. Not about work. He asked her nothing about what she did, and she, sensing the shape of the evening, asked him nothing back. They talked about the jazz bar, about a Chet Baker record he thought was underrated, about a bookstore in Guangdong where she should go on a rainy afternoon. He had a dry, precise sense of humor that took her a full 30 minutes to catch. When she finally laughed, really laughed, the kind she hadn't done in months, he turned and looked at her for the first time straight on, and something in his face shifted briefly before it settled again. At the end of the night, he paid her tab before she noticed. When she protested, he said, "You'll owe me one. Somewhere else. Another night." She said, "You don't even know if you'll see me again." He almost smiled. "I have a feeling." He left. She sat at the bar for another 20 minutes, warm in a way she hadn't been in a long time, and then she gathered her coat and walked home along the small streets of Hongdae in the rain that had just started. It was only the next morning, drinking coffee in her hotel room and scrolling idly through the Vantage briefing packet on Baek Holdings, that she saw the photograph. Chairman Baek Sung-hoon, founder, deceased 2019. And below him, in the corporate org chart, the current head of Baek Holdings' Strategic Operations Division, Baek Junho, age 36, Seoul heir. The photograph was 3 years old, but the scar was the same. She set the coffee down very carefully on the desk so that it would not spill. She didn't sleep that night. She lay on the low bed in the Bukchon Hotel and stared at the wooden beams of the ceiling and tried to reconstruct minute by minute every sentence he had said to her at the bar. He had known who she was. He had known her name. She had introduced herself as Imani, but he had not seemed surprised. He had known her Korean was good because he had probably read a file on her. He had chosen the bar, Nadia's friend of a friend. How coincidental was that, really? Her stomach turned. But underneath the nausea, something else. He hadn't touched her. He hadn't asked her a single question about the deal. He had, when the pianist stumbled on a chord, made a small pained face like someone who understood music personally. He had paid her tab quietly, without display. If he was playing her, he was playing a very long game. She spent the next morning at a cafe in Samcheong-dong, doing what any good analyst does when she suspects she is being handled. She pulled every open-source document she could find on Baek Junho. There was almost nothing. Baek Holdings had, over the last decade, developed a corporate policy of near-total media silence about the family. There were 3 photographs of Junho on the entire Korean internet, one from a charity gala in 2019, one from his father's funeral, and one from a business conference in 2022, where he had spoken for 11 minutes about supply chain reform and then left. In all 3, he was wearing a similar coat and looking at something just off camera. There were, however, 2 Reuters articles, both dated 2020, both quickly buried, both referring to long-standing rumors that Baek Holdings' Strategic Operations Division was the legitimate front for something the reporters delicately called traditional Korean organizational interests. Imani closed her laptop. She sat for a long time looking out the cafe window at a woman across the street selling persimmons from a wooden crate. She thought about her mother's furnace, about Terrence's second semester of graduate school, which was coming up in the spring, about Kenya, who had just texted her a photo of Amir's report card with a heart emoji and a request for $200 for winter clothes. She thought about Gregory Halpern's teeth and Blake's promotion, and the 18 months of keep your head down that lay between her and a title she should have already had. She thought about the way Junho had said, "You'll owe me one." Her phone buzzed on the cafe table. A number she didn't recognize. A Korean number. "Youngwon-hee tomorrow at 9. Same seat. I owe you an explanation before you take the meeting on Saturday. Jay." She stared at the message. Then she called Nadia. Nadia picked up on the second ring, sleepy. It was 2 a.m. in Baltimore. Imani told her in a low, fast whisper everything. The bar, the name, the org chart, the article, the text. Nadia was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Imani, baby. Listen to me. I want you to hear me clearly." "I'm listening." "You go to that bar tomorrow. You order the old-fashioned. You sit down. You let him talk. And then you decide." A pause. "Because here's the thing. You have spent your entire life having people decide things about you. Your mama decided you were the strong one. Gregory decided you were the secret weapon. Every man you ever dated decided what version of you he wanted. If this man is what those articles suggest he is not a good man. But he is, at least, offering you the dignity of an explanation. Take the explanation. Then make the decision. Yours, for once." Imani exhaled. "What if I make the wrong one?" "Then you make the wrong one on purpose, with your eyes open, instead of the right one because someone else told you to." She went to the bar. He was already there, same seat. This time he turned when she walked in. She sat down. She did not order. "Say it," she said. He nodded once. "My father founded Beck Holdings in 1978. The legitimate businesses, logistics, hotels, media, are legitimate. They generate roughly 87% of our revenue. The other 13% is not." He said this evenly, the way another man might describe a stock portfolio. "I inherited both when he died. I have spent 7 years trying to fold the second into the first. Legally, quietly. It is not simple work. It is the reason your firm has been refused 6 times. "Then why me?" "Because 6 months ago, I hired a firm in Singapore to identify the best emerging markets analyst under 35 in the North American market, who was not already compromised by an existing relationship with a Korean chaebol. Your name came back 3 times, from 3 different lists. Your work on the Ghana Infrastructure Fund in 2022 was the cleanest piece of due diligence I have read in this decade." She had not known anyone outside Vantage had read that report. Gregory had put his own name on the cover. "And the bar," she said. "Last night." He held her eyes. "I wanted to know if I liked you before I offered you the job. I do not conduct business with people I do not respect." "And do you? Respect you?" "Like me." He didn't answer for a moment. Then, "That is a separate question, and it is not one I have the right to answer while I am about to hand you a contract." She sat back. She said, "There is something you need to know before we go any further." He waited. "If I take this job, and it turns out that 13% is worse than you're telling me, if it involves anything that hurts a woman, or a child, or a person who couldn't say no, I will burn every document I ever touched for you and I will walk out. And no scar and no black car and no explanation is going to stop me." For the first time since she had met him, Baek Junho smiled. A small, real, unguarded smile. "Ms. Whitfield," he said, "that is precisely why I hired the firm in Singapore." They talked for 4 hours. He told her the truth, as much of it as he could tell in a jazz bar with a bartender pretending not to listen. His father's organization had, in the 1980s and 90s, been involved in what he called the ordinary sins: protection, gambling, port control on the southern coast. His father had, before he died, begun the work of severing those ties. Junho had accelerated it. The last 7 years had been a slow, methodical unwinding, buying out old lieutenants, forcing retirements, converting cash-intensive operations into legitimate hospitality holdings, and, more than once, personally intervening when older men in the organization tried to expand into territories he had forbidden. human trafficking, narcotics, anything he called the sins that don't wash out. He had made enemies. 2 attempts on his life in the last 3 years. He touched the scar on his face without seeming to notice he was doing it. "I need someone," he said, "who can build the financial architecture for the final conversion. It is a 3-year project. Publicly, you will be leading the acquisition strategy for Maybach Holdings' North American expansion. Privately, you will be helping me finish killing what my father started. The pay is 4 times your current salary. The risk is real but manageable. And when it is done, if you want, I will personally endorse you for any position at any firm in the world. You will not need to ask anyone for anything again." She looked at him. "And if I say no?" "Then I pay for your flight home, we shake hands, and you never hear from me again. There is no coercion in this offer. If there were, you would not be the right person for the work." She thought about her mother's voice on the phone. "Don't start being funny now." She thought about Gregory Halpern's teeth. She thought about the woman she had been on the sidewalk in Baltimore, standing at the edge of her own life like a stranger. "I want 3 things," she said. He tilted his head. 1. Everything in writing. Every operation you want me near. I see the paper first. If you can't put it on paper, I don't touch it." "Agreed." 2. I choose my own team. 2 analysts minimum, from outside your organization. You pay them, but they answer to me." "Agreed." 3. She paused. This was the one she had not planned. It surfaced from somewhere lower than her strategy. "Whatever this is between us, whatever last night was, whatever the bar was, it stops until the work is done. I will not be someone's employee and someone's whatever else at the same time. I've watched too many women lose themselves in that math." Something flickered in his face. Not disappointment. Something more like recognition. "Agreed," he said. "That was going to be my condition, too." She almost laughed. Of course it was. They shook hands over the bar. His hand was warm and dry, and, she noticed, had a small callus on the outside edge of the palm, the kind you get from writing by hand for a long time. The Cheongdam Noir tasting was 3 days later. It was, he had told her, a symbolic thing. The older men of his father's generation would be there, watching. If she walked in as his hire, they needed to see that she walked in with his weight behind her. The doorman had, apparently, received no such briefing. She thought about the sidewalk, the rain, the velvet rope, the woman in the Miu Miu jacket laughing into her friend's shoulder. She thought about how she had almost turned around, how, 6 months ago, she absolutely would have. She thought about the way Junho had crossed the sidewalk. No hurry, no ceremony, just a man arriving where he had said he would arrive, and offered her his arm. She had taken it not because she needed rescuing. She had taken it because they had, 3 days earlier in a jazz bar, negotiated a partnership, and this was the first time it was being tested in public. She was not being escorted. She was being witnessed. Inside Cheongdam Noir, the older men rose from their seats when she entered. They bowed, not to Junho, to her. She bowed back, the exact depth for a business counterpart, no deeper, and took her seat at table 7. The work began the next morning. 3 months in, long past the moment when a lesser story would have made her fall in love with him, she was sitting in her new office on the 41st floor of the Maybach Holdings Tower, 16 hours into a due diligence memo on a hotel acquisition in Busan, when her phone rang. It was her mother. She almost didn't pick up. Then she did. "Baby," Dolores said. "Baby, I need—" Imani listened. She listened for a full minute. She heard the familiar shape of it. An amount, a deadline, a story about someone else's need funneled through her mother's mouth into her lap. Then she said, "Mama, I love you. I'm going to send you a text with the number for a financial counselor at your bank. Her name is Ms. Watkins. I already called her. She's expecting you. I'm not sending the money." The silence on the other end of the line was the loudest silence of Imani's life. "You not sending it?" "No, ma'am, I'm not." "Girl, don't you get up on your high horse just because you in Korea?" "Mama, I love you. Call Ms. Watkins. I have to go back to work." She hung up. She put her phone face down on the desk. Her hands were shaking, but she opened her memo and she kept typing. That was the first boundary. It would not be the last. The first 3 months of Imani's work at Beck Holdings looked, from the outside, like the least dramatic job in the world. She built spreadsheets. She flew to Busan, Jeju, Daegu. She sat in windowless rooms with lawyers and read 15-year-old contracts for real estate holdings held by shell companies whose original signatories were mostly dead. She interviewed retired managers of Bayek subsidiaries in tea houses in old neighborhoods, listening more than she spoke, letting them tell her stories about the 1990s. Slowly, a map emerged. There was a logistics subsidiary called Hansel Freight that was on paper moving textiles between Busan and Ho Chi Minh City. Its margins were absurd. Its trucks were half empty on outbound legs. Its books had been signed off by the same auditor for 11 years, a man named Cho Byung-shik, whose son-in-law happened to sit on the subsidiary's board. There was a hotel in the Itaewon district that had reported $9 million in renovation costs over 3 years, and looked, when Imani flew up to inspect it, exactly the way it had looked in the 2018 Google Street View image. There was a consulting firm in Gangnam that had 6 employees and had, over the previous fiscal year, invoiced Beck Holdings for $4.2 million in advisory services that no one in the company could describe when she asked. She built the case, every irregularity indexed, every counterparty documented, every dollar traced. She did it the way she had been trained to do it, clean, boring, unimpeachable. And then, on a Tuesday in February, she walked into Junho's office and put a black binder on his desk. "Hansel Freight is a laundry," she said. "The Itaewon Hotel is a laundry. The Gangnam consulting firm is where the 2 of them meet. All 3 trace back to your father's old lieutenant, Mr. Oh Tae-shik. He is the man you have been trying to force into retirement for 2 years. He is stealing from you. He has been stealing from you since your father died." Junho did not open the binder. He looked at her for a long moment, and then he said quietly, "I know." She blinked. "You know." "I have suspected for 18 months. I did not have proof. That is why I hired you." He gestured at the binder. "How airtight?" "Airtight enough for the Financial Supervisory Service. Airtight enough for a criminal referral. If you want to end him publicly, we can. If you want to end him privately, we can do that too. I am not telling you what to do. I am telling you what is now possible." He was quiet for a long time. "Publicly," he finally said. "He has hurt too many people to disappear into a golf club in Jeju. I want a headline. I want the whole industry to see it." "That will make you enemies." "I already have enemies. I would rather have new ones than keep letting the old ones eat from my hand." She nodded. She turned to leave. "Imani." She turned back. "Thank you." She said nothing. She left the office. She walked to the elevator. She got in. She pressed the button for the 41st floor, and when the doors closed and she was alone in the mirror-walled box descending through the tower, she watched her own reflection and thought, "I have never, in my entire life, had a man in a position of power say thank you to me for something I did well." She had not known, until that moment, how much of her body had been tensed for the next round of taking. The referral to the Financial Supervisory Service was made on a Friday. The story broke on Monday. By Wednesday, Oh Tae-shik had been arrested on charges of embezzlement, fraud, and money laundering. The Korean business press ran his mugshot next to a decade of photographs from Bayek family galas. The narrative, carefully seeded by a PR firm Imani had helped select, was that Baek Junho had personally ordered an internal audit of legacy holdings inherited from his father and had insisted on prosecuting the findings regardless of family embarrassment. Beck Holdings stock, for the publicly listed subsidiaries, rose 4% in the following week. A German investment fund that had been quietly refusing to work with the company for a decade requested a meeting. Gregory Halpern in Baltimore emailed her 3 times. She responded to none of them. Vantage Capital had, technically, seconded her to Beck Holdings for the project. Under the terms of her secondment, she was still Vantage's employee, and any career growth attributable to the assignment was, contractually, to be credited back to the Baltimore firm. She had, in her first month at Bayek, hired a small employment attorney in New York named Rita Ferreira to review her Vantage contract line by line. Rita had called her back after a week. "Girl," she had said, "the non-compete is unenforceable in New York and in Maryland. The IP assignment applies to work product originating during Vantage employment, which means anything you built at Bayek that was based on Bayek's proprietary data belongs to Bayek, not to Vantage. And the profit-sharing clause you thought applied to secondment revenue? It doesn't. It says client engagement, and Bayek Holdings is not a Vantage client. You are on secondment to them, which is a different legal animal. Gregory Halpern has been telling you that you're locked in. You're not." Imani had listened. She had thanked Rita. She had, that same afternoon, drafted a 2-line resignation letter to Vantage Capital and saved it in her drafts folder. She had not sent it yet. She was waiting for the right moment. If you're still with me, if you've made it this deep into her story and something in it is starting to feel familiar, do me a favor, hit that like button, not for me. For every woman you know, including yourself, who has ever sat on a resignation letter she was too afraid to send. Drop the words, "I see her," in the comments. I want to see how many of us there are. Because the moment Imani finally sent that letter was coming faster than she thought, and it was going to arrive in the form of the last person on Earth she expected to see, standing in the lobby of the Bayek Holdings Tower. The lobby of the Bayek Holdings Tower had a ceiling 40 feet high, a wall of black stone with the company logo carved into it in a single unbroken line, and a security desk staffed by 3 men who had, over 4 months, learned to greet Imani in English before she reached the turnstiles. On the Thursday after Otai-shik's indictment, Imani walked into that lobby at 8:47 in the morning, coffee in one hand, laptop bag on her shoulder, and saw Gregory Halpern sitting on the leather bench by the water feature. He stood up when he saw her. He was smiling, the teeth, the purchased teeth. "Imani!" He crossed the lobby with his arms slightly out, as if he might hug her. She stopped walking. He stopped too, 4 feet away. "Wow! Wow, look at you! You look... Seoul is treating you well." "Gregory!" She kept her voice level. "What are you doing here?" "I flew in last night. I wanted to surprise you. Congratulations on the O thing. That was huge. The Baltimore office is buzzing. Everyone is buzzing." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Listen, we need to talk. Beck is going to want to formalize their relationship with Vantage now, and you and I need to be on the same page about how the account gets structured. I was thinking..." "There's no account, Gregory." He blinked. "I'm sorry. Beck Holdings is not going to sign with Vantage. They are going to sign a direct engagement with me. As of Monday, I will be their North American strategic advisor, not as a Vantage secondee, independently." She had, in fact, decided this 3 weeks earlier. She had, that morning in the car on the way to work, hit send on the resignation letter that had been sitting in her drafts folder for 2 months. Gregory had not, apparently, checked his email yet. He was still smiling, but the smile had frozen at the edges. "Imani, sweetheart, that's not how this works. You are on secondment. Any client relationship you developed during that time belongs to Vantage. I know. I've had a lawyer review the contract. The client relationship, if there were one, would belong to Vantage. But there isn't one. Beck Holdings never signed a master services agreement with Vantage. The secondment was structured as a talent loan. I checked." "So did they. So did my lawyer. So did their lawyers." She took a small sip of her coffee. It was still hot. "I resigned from Vantage this morning at 6:15 Seoul time. You should have the email by now." His face did something she had never seen it do before. The smile cracked. Underneath the smile was a much older man than she had ever noticed. "You can't be serious." "I have never been more serious about anything in my life. After everything I did for you." She stopped him with a look. It was a look she had not known she owned until that moment. It was the look Nadia had, the look her mother had once had before life had worn it down, the look a woman gives a man when she is done, finally and permanently, protecting him from the truth about himself. "Gregory." Her voice was almost gentle. "You didn't do anything for me. I did it for you. And you took the credit. And you gave the promotion to Blake. And you called me your secret weapon at dinners where you forgot to invite me to the meetings. I owe you nothing. I am not being ungrateful. I am correcting the record." Behind her, the elevator dinged. Junho stepped out. He was in the charcoal coat again. He did not look at Gregory. He walked past them both, toward the security turnstile, and paused only long enough to say, in English, "Ms. Whitfield, 9 o'clock meeting. Whenever you're ready." He kept walking. The 3 security guards, watching from the desk, did not move. Gregory looked at Junho's bag. He looked at Imani. He looked at the security guards. Whatever calculation had been running in his head, whatever he had planned to say, whatever leverage he had planned to apply, dissolved in real time on his face. "I'll be in the hotel bar tonight," he said. His voice was smaller now. "If you want to talk." "I don't," she said. She turned. She walked through the turnstile. She got in the elevator. She did not look back to see him leave. On the 41st floor, the doors opened, and she stepped out into the hallway. Junho was standing by the window at the end of the corridor, his back to her, looking out at the city. He didn't turn around when she approached. "He came all the way from Baltimore," Junho said. "He did. I could have had him refused at the airport. I know you could have. I did not, because I thought you would want to end that yourself." She stopped a few feet behind him. "Thank you," she said, "for not doing it for me." He nodded once without turning. They stood in silence for a moment, looking out at the city, at the traffic below, at the mountains in the distance, at the sky the color of a coin. Then she went to her office. She had a meeting at 9. Kenya flew into Incheon 2 weeks later. She flew in without warning. She flew in on the money that Imani had, until 3 months earlier, been sending her every month. And she flew in with an attitude Imani had felt through the text messages that morning. "I'm here. I'm at your building. Come down." Like a fist through a wall. Imani rode the elevator down. Her hands were steady. She noticed that they were steady and made a small note of it, the way she had learned to make small notes of the ways her body was changing. Kenya was in the lobby, in a puffer coat that was too warm for the weather, with a small carry-on suitcase and the expression of a woman who had already prepared a speech. "Kenya?" "Don't Kenya me. Mama's in the hospital." Imani's stomach flipped once. "What?" Okay, not the hospital. Urgent care, her blood pressure. She had a spell yesterday and had to sit down at the grocery store. And it's because of you, Imani. It's because of the stress you've been putting her under. Cutting her off, not sending money, giving her some counselor's phone number like she's some... Kenya's voice broke. It broke in a practiced way. Like she's some charity case. She raised you. And now you got this fancy job in Korea and you too good to help your own mama? Imani let her finish. There is a specific kind of listening that a woman learns to do when she has decided, in advance, not to be moved. It is not cold. It is not cruel. It is a quality of attention that lets the other person's words land where they land, without adjusting yourself to catch them. She let Kenya finish, and then she said, "How much do you need?" Kenya blinked. "What?" "How much did you fly here to ask me for? Give me the number." "That's not—" "Kenya." She said it softly. "I love you. I have loved you your entire life. I've paid your rent. I've paid Amir's daycare. I've paid your car insurance twice. I've bought your winter coats. I am asking you a direct question. How much did you come here to ask me for?" Kenya's face crumpled. 12,000. For what? For the credit cards, and a little for Mama, and Amir needs... You are not getting $12,000 from me. You are not getting 1,200. You are not getting 12. Kenya stared at her. Who are you right now? And there it was. The question Imani had been waiting for her entire life, not asked with love, asked as an accusation. She took a breath. "I am your sister," she said. "I am Dolores's daughter. I am the woman who is going to book you a return flight to Baltimore for tomorrow morning, because I am not putting you up in my apartment, and I am not taking you out to dinner, and I am not paying your credit cards, and I am not the ATM anymore. I am also the woman who is going to fly home in 3 weeks for Mama's birthday, at my own expense, and take her to the doctor myself, and sit down with her and Ms. Watkins, and go over her actual financial situation, which none of you have ever done, because you have all been too busy sending the bill to me. That is who I am. I am not a bad daughter. I am not a bad sister. I am just done being the only adult in a family of adults. Kenya was crying now, actual tears. Whether they were performance or grief, Imani could no longer afford to distinguish. "You're gonna regret this," Kenya said. "When Mama dies—" "Don't." Imani's voice was very quiet. "Don't use her death to buy something from me. That is beneath you, and it is beneath the woman she raised you to be." Kenya wiped her face. She picked up her carry-on. She stood there for a moment, looking at Imani like she was seeing her for the first time. "You changed," she said. "I did," Imani said. "Thank you for noticing." She hugged her sister. Kenya, after a moment, hugged her back. It was not a warm hug. It was not a cold hug. It was the hug of two women beginning, painfully, to understand each other as they actually were. Imani booked the return flight from her phone while they stood there. She walked Kenya out to the taxi. She paid for the taxi. Then she walked back into the tower and rode the elevator up to the 41st floor. And she did not cry until she reached her office, and she closed the door, and she sat down at her desk, and she let herself cry for exactly 11 minutes. Then she washed her face in the bathroom down the hall, and she went back to work. 10 months after her first meeting at Cheongdam Noir, Imani Whitfield opened her own advisory firm. She called it Whitfield and Hale. The Hale was Nadia's mother's maiden name, and she had asked Nadia's permission over a video call, and Nadia had cried and said, "Girl, you better not." She had put it on the letterhead anyway. The firm had 3 clients on day 1. Beck Holdings was one of them, on a retainer that made her financially independent for the next 5 years, even if she never took on another engagement. The German investment fund was the second. A Nigerian sovereign wealth-adjacent group, introduced through a woman she'd met at a conference in Singapore, was the third. She rented office space on the 12th floor of a smaller building in Seongsu-dong, in a converted shoe factory with exposed brick and a coffee shop on the ground floor, run by a woman named Song Ai, who made a flat white worth walking 6 blocks for. She hired 2 analysts. One was a 28-year-old Korean woman named Han Ji-eun, who had been passed over 3 times at her previous firm for reasons she had stopped explaining. The other was a 31-year-old Indian-American man named Rohan Balakrishnan, who had been quietly boxed out of a New York private equity fund for asking too many questions about a deal that later turned out to be exactly what he had suspected. She paid them both 20% above the market rate. She wrote it into their contracts that any deal they sourced, they got a piece of. The first month, she did her own bookkeeping at night, at her kitchen table, with a bowl of ramyeon cooling next to the laptop. The second month, she hired a bookkeeper. The third month, she moved into a new apartment, a 2-bedroom in Yeonhui-dong, with a small balcony where she grew basil in a terracotta pot Song Ai had given her as a housewarming gift. She flew home to Baltimore for her mother's birthday, as promised. She took Dolores to the doctor. She sat with Ms. Watkins for 3 hours and helped her mother open a proper savings account, refinance the house, and set up an automatic monthly transfer of a modest, sustainable amount from Imani's account, enough to help, not enough to enable. She had the conversation with all 4 siblings at the kitchen table. Terrence cried. Malik got angry and then got quiet. Kenya did not speak to her for 6 weeks after, and then, one Sunday afternoon, sent her a photograph of Amir's first-grade class picture with the caption, "He asked about you. Told him you working." Imani had written back, "Tell him Auntie will be home for Christmas." She had. At Beck Holdings, the Strategic Operations Division was, by the end of that year, 78% converted into legitimate hospitality and logistics holdings. The last 22% was the hardest. The older loyalties, the family bonds, the men who had been at Junho's father's funeral and considered themselves owed. Imani did not do that work herself. She had, in her contract, drawn the line she had drawn in the bar. She saw the paper, or she did not touch it. Junho had, in the 10 months of their partnership, not once tried to move that line. She won an award in her 2nd year. A Korea-Asia business publication named her one of the 20 women reshaping capital in the region. She wore a green dress by a Nigerian designer to the ceremony. Her mother watched the live stream from Baltimore, from her kitchen, and called her at 3 a.m. Seoul time, crying, and said, "Baby, I always knew. I always knew." Imani had said, "I know you did, Mama." She had not corrected her mother. Some corrections you keep to yourself. Some victories are large enough that you do not need to redistribute them. In the mirror of the hotel bathroom that night, after the award ceremony, she looked at her own face for a long time. The face was 33 years old now. There were faint lines at the corners of her eyes that she had not had a year and a half ago. There was a quietness in her jaw. There was, above all, a steadiness in the eyes that she recognized from a photograph she had once seen of her grandmother. She thought, "There you are." She turned off the light. She went to bed. She slept for 10 hours, which was, when she counted it later, the longest continuous sleep she had gotten since she was 17 years old. Junho came to her office in Seongsu-dong on a Tuesday afternoon, 13 months after the Cheongdam Noir sidewalk. She had not seen him in 6 weeks. He had been in Osaka, closing the sale of the last Hansel Freight subsidiary, the final piece of the conversion, the last of his father's dark 13%, folded into the ordinary work of moving textiles from one clean port to another. He knocked on her open office door. He was in a gray suit, no coat, the scar catching the late afternoon light through her window. "You have a minute?" he said in English, which by then had become their private language, the one they used when they were not on the record with anyone. "For you? Yes?" He came in. He sat in the chair opposite her desk, not the one clients sat in, but the one Ji-eun sat in when they were working through a problem together. He set a small box on the desk between them, wooden, old, about the size of his palm. "What's this?" "Open it." She opened it. Inside, on a bed of dark blue silk, was a small brass key. She looked up. "2? A record player, in an apartment, in Hongdae, 10 minutes from Yongwon-hee. I bought it 8 months ago. I've been furnishing it slowly. It has the Chet Baker record you liked, and about 300 others, and a very good pair of speakers, and a kitchen I do not know how to use." He paused. "It is not a gift. It is an invitation. The condition we agreed on in the bar, until the work is done, that condition, from my side, is met on Friday, when the Osaka paperwork closes. I am not asking you for anything on Friday. I am not asking you for anything next month. I am telling you that a door exists, and it is unlocked, and it will remain unlocked, and you decide when, if ever, you walk through it. And if the answer is never, we continue as we are, and I will not raise it again." She looked at the key. She looked at him. She said, "Junho." He waited. "I need to tell you something." "All right." "I have spent a year and a half of my life becoming a woman I recognize. I did that work in your building and around you, and sometimes because of you, but I did not do it for you, and I am not going to give it to you. Whatever happens on Friday or after, I am not moving into your apartment. I am not adjusting my life around yours. If there is a version of this that involves the two of us, it looks like two people who each have their own key to their own door, and who occasionally, deliberately, choose to use the others." He nodded slowly. "That," he said, "is exactly what I was offering." She looked at him again, really looked. The scar, the stillness, the small callus on the outside edge of his hand from writing by hand. She said, "I have something for you, too." She opened the desk drawer. She took out a folded piece of paper. She slid it across the desk. He unfolded it. It was a photograph, printed, physical, the way her grandmother would have kept it. Him, at Yongwon-hee, on the first night, taken by the bar's owner, unbeknownst to him, from behind the bar. Junho was mid-sentence, laughing at something Imani had said. It was the only photograph in the world, Imani suspected, of Baek Junho actually laughing. "Where did you get this?" he said quietly. "Young Won-hee's owner mailed it to me last month. He said he had been waiting to see if it was ever appropriate to share it. He decided it was." Junho held the photograph for a long time. Then he said, without looking up, "Thank you." She said, "You're welcome." They sat in silence for a while, the way they had that first night. Then he stood up. He picked up the small wooden box, took the key out of it, and set the key on the desk between them. "I'll leave this," he said. "You decide." He left. She sat at her desk in the late afternoon light and looked at the key. She did not pick it up. She did not put it in a drawer. She left it on the desk, in the sun, where she could see it. That, she thought, was progress enough for today. There is a lie that women like Imani Whitfield are told, over and over again, from the time they are small. It is the lie that the reward for being the strong one is that someday someone stronger will come and rescue them. The truth is quieter and harder and better. The truth is that the reward for finally, refusing to be anyone's rescue is that you get to meet the person you were always trying to become. Sometimes she looks like a woman in a green dress on a stage in Seoul. Sometimes she looks like a woman in a bathrobe at her own kitchen table, drinking coffee alone, and finally, sleeping through the night. Imani did not walk into that VIP club because a Korean man in a black coat gave her permission. She walked in because a year earlier, in a Baltimore kitchen, she had felt something in her chest go very still, and she had followed that stillness across an ocean and into a jazz bar, and out onto a rainy sidewalk, and up to the 41st floor of a tower she now owned an office 2 neighborhoods away from. She didn't get a fairy tale ending. She didn't get rescued. She didn't get married in a white dress at the end of a montage. She got something better. She got herself back. If this story reached you, if you saw yourself in Imani, in her mother, in her sister, in the woman on the sidewalk in the rain, do 3 things for me before you close this video. Comment the word stillness, just that, so I know you were here, so the algorithm knows women like us are watching. Share this with the sister, the friend, the co-worker who needs to hear it. You already know who she is. You thought of her name in part 3. And subscribe, if you haven't already, because next week I'm telling the story of a woman who walked out of a courtroom in Atlanta with nothing but her handbag and rebuilt an empire from a folding table in her mother's garage. You are not going to want to miss it. Until then, be like Imani. Find your stillness and follow it home.